Today we will discuss Towles and Hawkins' model of second language acquisition. According to Towle and Hawkins, second language acquisition research has to deal with both the learner's attempts to learn a system, which is the language system, and learner's attempts to learn to use that system. So first of all, learning about the language system itself, and then second aspect is to do with how to use that learning system. Now this takes us to two key elements of this model, that is declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. Now SLA researchers claim that learners exposed to second language acquisition after 7 years encounter or get exposed to multiplicity of knowledge sources. That sources of knowledge are multiple in their nature, but broadly they come under declarative and procedural knowledge. The image that you have in front of you, you can see that's the model proposed by Towle and Hawkins, where you see the universal grammar, and this is T, which is transfer, this is M, which is mimicking. And you can see that the straight line from universal grammar through first language to internally derived, this is the internally derived hypothesis, suggests direct transfer. And the dashed line, these are the dashed lines, shows the potential mimicking of second language rules. Now the lines from universal grammar are continuous, where we can ascertain of the input of universal grammar into first language learning, but dashed where we cannot be certain that there is direct input from second language learning. So here we are not sure, but the straight line is indicating the direct input coming from the universal grammar. But in this mimicking part, where these dots, they indicate the uncertainty in terms of the direct input coming from second language in the second language process. Now, this mechanism basically is proposed by Towle and Hawkins, and I will be quoting from their research. Basically, this determines the information which is available to long-term memory. It is used in passing information between two kinds of long-term proposed, the declarative memory and procedural memory. So you can say this is the procedural memory and this is a declarative memory. Interaction between short-term memory and declarative knowledge is controlled here and functions via interpretive mechanism. So we see that as a result, it is slow but flexible because the user is paying attention to form. Interaction between short-term memory and procedural. Short-term memory and procedural. So interaction between short-term memory and the procedural memory will be seen as very fast but very inflexible, because the production in procedural memory are compiled complete wholes which may not be modified quite easily. All knowledge which is internal or external can be derived initially goes into this part, which is declarative memory. It is there that the internally derived hypothesis deposit the information they can provide. Equally, in externally derived information, for example, explicit instruction and form function formulas pass through short-term memory into the declarative memory. So it has been argued that declarative memory may operate at several levels of implicitness. The internally derived hypothesis from the universal grammar and L1 by definition offer substantive suggestions for the core of linguistic knowledge and those parameters which are applicable to languages. And they follow the information or the parameters, explicit rules, reorganized mental representation. Then you have input. Input comes from the authentic data and also the classroom data, and that's the output, which is based on the learner's interlanguage. So all these, as you can see, are connected to form the Towle and Hawkins model of SLA, where the key factors which are at function or key element that are operational is declarative memory and procedural memory. Now in the model you have seen three things: that universal grammar providing the all relevant information, and then that information moving into declarative memory and procedural memory. So it is the universal grammar which is a constant background to the language learning process. Now Towle and Hawkins also believe that it is therefore the background against which any language learning process takes place, and that background comes from the universal grammar. Now the universal grammar conditions but does not determine what happens. So basically the occurrences of what actually happens, that is not determined by universal grammar. It only provides the basic language or input. The actual learning process is dependent upon the nature and abilities of learners, the motivation of the learners, the degree of similarity between two or more languages in question, and the kind of exposure to the language which are available. So now these are another factors which have been identified by Towle and Hawkins, that in terms of learners' motivation, the ability, the kind of attitude the learner has towards the other languages after being exposed to them, they play important roles. So the process is dependent on these parameters as well. Towle and Hawkins propose 5 main questions addressing English as a second or foreign language. First is the transfer, and that is the transfer of grammatical properties from first language mental grammar into mental grammar of second language. Second is the staged development, whereby second language learner go through series of transitional stages as a part of their development of second language. Then systematicity. In the growth of second language knowledge across learners from different first language background acquiring the second language under different conditions of exposure. It can be naturalistic or versus classroom, the natural way of developing language habits, or through explicit instructions in classroom. But both go through the same stages of development. Variability is the fourth one, where learners' intuition about the production of the second language at various stages of development. Now these seem to allow for more than one variant for given construction, where the target language has only one form. So in terms of providing the variants, where the target language has only one form, one variant is given for construction. Incompleteness is the fifth question that needs to the fossilization. That incompleteness is where the forms are not developed and they are fossilized, whereby they remains incomplete. So the term has been used by Towle and Hawkins is incompleteness. To conclude, Towle and Hawkins' model of second language acquisition attempts to reconcile internal universal grammar derived hypotheses concerning the mechanism that functions during the processes of language learning and language use. It also explains the concept of declarative knowledge as well as the procedural knowledge.